The text message arrived at 3:47 a.m., lighting up my phone like a neon sign in our pristine bedroom. Your wife's at the Ritz with my husband again. Thought you should know. Amanda. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I'm Grant Elwood, 45 years old, and until that moment, I believed I was living the American dream. Successful architectural firm in Palm Beach, waterfront house with a pool that cost more than most people's cars, and a wife who looked like she stepped out of a magazine. Nina Harrow Elwood, boutique owner, social butterfly, and apparently a world-class liar. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 20 years designing homes for other people's happiness while my own was crumbling like cheap concrete. I rolled over to find Nina's side of the bed empty, sheets cold. Her note on the nightstand read, "Emergency inventory at the boutique. Back tomorrow. Love you." The timestamp on Amanda's message told a different story. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Amanda Chen, whose husband Oliver had been supplying materials for my construction projects for 3 years. The message included a photo that made my stomach drop like a failed foundation. Nina and Oliver, hands intertwined across a candlelit table at the Ritz-Carlton, her wedding ring conspicuously absent. I sat up in bed, staring at the image that shattered my world. Nina wore the black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last month. The same dress she'd claimed was too fancy for anywhere you'd take me. Apparently, it was perfect for wherever Oliver took her. The next morning, Nina returned home with shopping bags and a smile that felt like sandpaper against my raw nerves. "How was inventory?" I asked, watching her unpack luxury items that definitely weren't from her boutique. "Exhausting," she said without meeting my eyes. Sloan helped, but you know how she is. More talk than work. Sloan Martinez was Nina's best friend and business partner, a woman who treated gossip like currency and spent it freely. If anyone knew about Nina's extracurricular activities, it would be her. "I was thinking we should take a vacation," I said, testing the waters. "Maybe Miami, that new resort you mentioned." Nina's face brightened with genuine enthusiasm for the first time in months. "Really? You'd do that? I mean, it's pretty expensive." "Nothing's too expensive for my wife," I replied, each word carefully measured. "I'll book the penthouse suite." What I didn't tell her was that I'd already started documenting everything. Bank statements showing mysterious charges at restaurants I'd never been to, credit card bills for lingerie I'd never seen her wear, hotel receipts from weekends when she claimed to be at business conferences. My friend Jesse Rodriguez from the office had noticed the change in me immediately. "You look like someone ran over your dog," he said, dropping into the chair across from my desk. "What's eating you?" I showed him the photo. Jesse whistled low, shaking his head. "Man, I'm sorry. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to give her exactly what she wants," I said. "A chance to embarrass me in public." The Miami trip was scheduled for the following weekend. I booked everything first class: penthouse suite, spa treatments, dinner reservations at the most exclusive restaurants. I wanted Nina to feel like royalty before I pulled the rug out from under her perfectly manicured feet. Friday afternoon, we drove down to Miami in my BMW, Nina chattering excitedly about the resort's amenities. She'd packed enough clothes for a month, including several outfits I'd never seen before. "This is so romantic," she said, squeezing my arm as we pulled into the resort's circular drive. "I can't believe you did all this." The Ocean View Resort was everything the brochures promised: marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and staff who treated every guest like visiting royalty. Our suite overlooked the Atlantic, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a private balcony. Nina immediately began taking selfies, posting them to her social media with captions about her amazing husband and perfect life. The comments poured in from her friends, all heart emojis and jealous remarks about how lucky she was. If only they knew what I knew. That evening, we had dinner at the resort's 5-star restaurant. Nina wore a red dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, her hair styled in perfect waves. She looked stunning, and every man in the restaurant noticed, including me, unfortunately. "This is incredible," she said, sampling the lobster bisque. "I could get used to this lifestyle." "Funny," I said, cutting into my steak. "I thought you already had." She looked up sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just that you seem comfortable with luxury." The conversation moved on, but I caught her texting under the table several times. Each ping of her phone felt like a nail in our marriage's coffin. Saturday morning, we walked along the beach. Nina wore a designer bikini that left little to the imagination, drawing stares from every man we passed. She basked in the attention, practically glowing with pride. "Take my picture by the water," she demanded, posing like a professional model. I obliged, snapping photos while she struck various poses. Other beachgoers stopped to watch, clearly impressed by her beauty. She was putting on quite a show. "You're so lucky to have me," she said, not entirely joking. "Look at all these men staring." "I see them," I replied. We found a spot near the resort's private beach area, surrounded by other wealthy couples. Nina immediately began comparing our setup to everyone else's, pointing out who had better umbrellas, chairs, or service. "Those people over there have champagne," she observed. "Why don't we have champagne?" I signaled the beach attendant, who brought over a bottle of Dom Perignon and 2 crystal flutes. Nina's eyes lit up as she took her first sip. "Now this is living," she said, raising her glass for another selfie. As the afternoon wore on, Nina became more animated, laughing loudly and drawing attention to herself. She seemed to be performing for an invisible audience, and I realized that's exactly what she was doing. Everything was content for her social media empire. "Come here," she said, pulling me close for a couple's photo. "Smile like you mean it." I smiled, but it felt like wearing a mask made of broken glass. That evening, we attended the resort's exclusive cocktail party on the rooftop terrace. Nina had changed into a black cocktail dress and diamond earrings I'd given her for Christmas. She looked like a movie star, and she knew it. The party was full of wealthy couples, business executives, and social media influencers. Nina worked the room like a professional networker, collecting compliments and contact information with equal enthusiasm. "Your wife is absolutely stunning," a silver-haired businessman told me. "You're a lucky man." "So everyone keeps telling me?" I replied. I watched Nina from across the terrace, laughing with a group of women who hung on her every word. She was in her element, the center of attention, completely in control. It would have been beautiful if it weren't built on lies. My phone buzzed. Another message from Amanda. "Oliver's in Miami, too. Same hotel. Thought you should know." I looked around the party with new eyes, scanning for Oliver's familiar face. I didn't see him, but that didn't mean he wasn't there. The resort was massive, with multiple restaurants, bars, and private areas. "Having fun?" Nina appeared at my elbow, slightly breathless from working the room. "Absolutely," I said. "This is exactly what I needed." She beamed at me, and for a moment, I almost forgot about the photo, the lies, the betrayal. Almost. Sunday morning arrived with perfect weather and a plan that had been forming in my mind since Amanda's first text. Nina wanted to spend our last day on the beach, showing off her perfect life to anyone who would look. "This has been the best weekend ever," she said, adjusting her new designer sun hat. "We should do this more often." "We should," I agreed. "In fact, I think we should make some changes in our lives." "What kind of changes?" "Oh, you'll see." We set up our spot on the beach, surrounded by other resort guests enjoying their final day in paradise. Nina immediately began her usual routine of posing, preening, and posting to social media. "Take a picture of me walking into the water," she instructed. "Make sure you get the resort in the background." I took the photo, watching through the camera lens as my wife performed for her online audience. Everything was about appearances, about projecting an image of perfection that didn't exist. "Now, take one of us together," she said, wrapping her arms around me. "Something romantic." As she pressed close to me, I caught a whiff of cologne that wasn't mine. The same cologne I'd smelled on the materials Oliver delivered to my construction sites. The pieces of the puzzle clicked together with devastating clarity. "You know what?" Nina said suddenly, pulling away from me. "Stop hugging me so much in public. You're embarrassing me." The words hit like a physical blow. Around us, other couples were embracing, laughing, enjoying their time together. But somehow, my affection for my wife was embarrassing. "Embarrassing?" I repeated. "You're just too much sometimes. All this touching and romantic stuff. People are staring." I looked around at the other couples, none of whom seemed to find our behavior noteworthy. "I see." "Don't be dramatic," she said, turning back to her phone. "I just think we should be more sophisticated about how we show affection." Sophisticated. Like having an affair with my business partner was sophisticated. "You're absolutely right," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "I wouldn't want to embarrass you." Nina smiled, satisfied that she'd put me in my place. She had no idea she'd just sealed her own fate. "I'm glad you understand," she said, returning to her selfies. "Image is everything, you know?" Yes, I thought, watching her pose for another photo. It certainly is. And I was about to show her exactly what that meant. The flight home from Miami was a masterclass in passive-aggressive tension. Nina chattered about the resort, the food, the people we'd met, completely oblivious to the storm brewing beside her. I made appropriate responses while mentally cataloging every lie she'd told over the weekend. We should plan another trip soon, she said as we deplaned in West Palm Beach. Maybe somewhere international. I've always wanted to go to Tuscany. That sounds expensive, I replied. Oh, come on. You just spent a fortune on Miami. What's a little more for Tuscany? What indeed? Monday morning brought a return to routine that felt anything but normal. Nina left early for her boutique, claiming she had inventory to catch up on after our weekend away. I went to my office and immediately called my attorney, Patricia Hendricks, a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in complex divorces. I need to see you today, I told her. It's urgent. What's the situation? My wife is having an affair with one of my business partners. I have evidence. Patricia's voice sharpened with professional interest. How much evidence? Photos, bank records, credit card statements, hotel receipts, everything. Bring it all. And Grant, don't do anything stupid while you're angry. Let me handle this legally. I spent the morning gathering documents, creating a file that painted a clear picture of Nina's betrayal. The evidence was damning, and charges at expensive restaurants on nights when she claimed to be working late, hotel bills from weekends when she said she was visiting her sister, purchases of men's clothing and accessories that had never appeared in my closet. Jesse knocked on my office door around noon, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing a concerned expression. You look like hell, he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. How was the romantic getaway? Educational, I replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. I learned that my wife finds public displays of affection embarrassing. Ouch. That's not even the worst part. I think Oliver was at the same resort. Jesse's eyebrows shot up. You think or you know? I know he was in Miami. Amanda Chen confirmed it. Whether he was at our specific hotel? I shrugged. Does it matter? The man's been sleeping with my wife for months, probably longer. What are you going to do? I'm going to give Nina exactly what she wants. A sophisticated approach to our relationship. That afternoon, I met with Patricia in her downtown office. She reviewed my evidence with the methodical precision of a surgeon, occasionally making notes or asking clarifying questions. This is solid, she said finally. More than enough to establish adultery and misuse of marital funds. What's your goal here? Quick settlement or maximum damage? What do you mean? Some clients want to end things quietly and move on. Others want to make their cheating spouse pay in every way possible. Which are you? I thought about Nina's words on the beach, the dismissive way she'd pushed me away, the months of lies and deception. Maximum damage, I said. Patricia smiled grimly. Then we're going to have some fun. First step is freezing the joint accounts and credit cards. I'll file the paperwork today. By tomorrow morning, she won't be able to spend a dime of your money. What about her boutique? That's where it gets interesting. According to these records, you've been funding her business losses for the past 2 years. The boutique is essentially insolvent without your support. When we cut off the money supply, it fades. Exactly. And if Oliver's been receiving gifts purchased with marital funds, we can go after him for reimbursement. This could get very expensive for both of them. I left Patricia's office feeling lighter than I had in months. For the first time since discovering Nina's affair, I had a plan. More importantly, I had the tools to execute it. That evening, Nina came home laden with shopping bags and bubbling with excitement about her day. She'd apparently spent several $100s on new clothes, using the credit card that would be canceled by morning. I had lunch with Sloane today, she said, unpacking her purchases. She's so jealous of our Miami trip. I showed her all the photos. I'm sure she was impressed. She said we looked like the perfect couple. Isn't that sweet? The perfect couple, built on a foundation of lies and held together with credit cards that were about to be cut up. Nina, I said carefully, we need to talk about our finances. She looked up from her shopping bags, suddenly wary. What about them? The boutique has been losing money for months. I've been covering the shortfalls, but I think it's time we had a serious conversation about whether it's viable. The boutique is fine, she said quickly. We're just going through a slow period. It happens in retail. A 2-year slow period? Business is complicated. You wouldn't understand. I wouldn't understand. The man who'd built a multi-million-dollar architectural firm from scratch wouldn't understand business. Maybe you're right, I said, but I think we should still be more careful with our spending. Nina's face flushed with anger. Are you trying to control me? Because I won't stand for that. I'm trying to be responsible. Responsible? You just spent thousands of dollars on a weekend in Miami, and now you want to lecture me about buying a few clothes? You're right, I said, raising my hands in surrender. I'm sorry. Spend whatever makes you happy. She studied my face suspiciously, clearly expecting more of a fight. When none came, she relaxed slightly. I'm glad you see reason, she said. I work hard, and I deserve nice things. Of course you do. That night, I lay awake listening to Nina sleep peacefully beside me, completely unaware that her world was about to implode. I felt a moment of something that might have been guilt, quickly replaced by the memory of her pushing me away on the beach. You're embarrassing me, not anymore. Tuesday morning arrived with the first phase of my revenge. Nina left for work early, as usual, probably planning to meet Oliver for breakfast before opening the boutique. I went to my office and waited for Patricia's call. It came at 10:15 a.m. The accounts are frozen, she reported. Credit cards are canceled. I've also filed a temporary restraining order on joint assets. She can't sell anything significant without court approval. How long before she finds out? Probably the first time she tries to use a card. I'd estimate sometime before lunch. I didn't have to wait long. My phone started ringing at 11:30 a.m. Nina's name flashed on the screen, and I let it go to voicemail. She called 6 more times in the next hour, each voicemail more frantic than the last. Grant, my credit card isn't working. Call me. Grant, seriously, I need you to call me right now. Something's wrong with our accounts. Grant, I'm at the bank, and they're saying our accounts are frozen. What the hell is going on? Grant, if you don't call me back in the next 10 minutes, I'm coming to your office. She made good on that threat. Nina stormed into my office at 1:15 p.m., her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Jesse quickly made himself scarce, closing the door behind him as he left. What did you do? She demanded. I looked up from my computer with practiced calm. I'm sorry. Don't play dumb with me. Our accounts are frozen. My credit cards are canceled. The bank manager treated me like a criminal. That's strange. Did you ask them why? They said there was legal action pending. What legal action, Grant? I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. She was genuinely confused, which meant she hadn't considered that I might know about her affair. In her mind, she'd been careful, discreet, sophisticated. I filed for divorce this morning, I said simply. The words hit her like a physical blow. She actually staggered backward, gripping the edge of my desk for support. You what? I filed for divorce. Patricia Hendricks is representing me. I believe you'll be hearing from her attorney soon. You can't be serious. Over what? We had one little fight on the beach? One little fight. That's how she characterized months of lies and betrayal. It's not about the fight, Nina. It's about Oliver. Her face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the photo Amanda had sent me, sliding it across the desk. Nina stared at it for a long moment, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Where did you get this? Does it matter? The question is, how long has it been going on? She straightened up, and I watched her shift from shock to defiance in real time. So what if I've been seeing Oliver? You've been neglecting me for months. Years, even. A woman has needs. A woman also has divorce lawyers, as do men. You're making a huge mistake, she said, her voice taking on a threatening tone. I'll take you for everything you're worth. The house, the business, your retirement accounts, everything. With what? You can't afford a cup of coffee right now, let alone a divorce attorney. The reality of her situation began to sink in. Without access to our joint accounts, Nina was essentially broke. Her boutique operated on a shoestring budget that depended entirely on my financial backing. She had no independent income, no savings, no credit. This is financial abuse, she said desperately. No court will stand for this. Actually, Florida law allows for the immediate freezing of assets when adultery is suspected. Patricia was very thorough in her research. Nina stood there for a long moment, clearly trying to process the magnitude of her situation. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, more uncertain. Grant, we can work this out. It doesn't have to be like this. Oliver doesn't mean anything to me. It was just a mistake. A mistake that lasted how long? Months? Years? It's over. I'll end it today. We can go to counseling, work on our marriage. Please? For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. You said I embarrassed you, I reminded her. In public, in front of strangers. You pushed me away like I was some kind of creep. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it? She had no answer for that. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to move out of our house by the end of the week. You can take your personal belongings, but nothing else. The boutique will close when the rent comes due next month, unless you can find another investor. And you're going to stay away from Oliver because he's about to have legal problems of his own. What kind of legal problems? The kind that happen when you accept expensive gifts purchased with stolen money. Patricia's very creative when it comes to asset recovery. Nina's face crumpled. You're destroying my life. No, I said, standing up from my desk. I'm just refusing to pay for it anymore. She left without another word, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Jesse poked his head in a few minutes later, whistling softly. That sounded intense. Phase 1 is complete, I said. Now things get interesting. Wednesday morning brought the first signs that word was spreading through Palm Beach's tight-knit social circle. My phone buzzed with text messages from acquaintances who'd heard rumors about Nina and me having problems. The gossip mill was already working overtime. Sloan was the first to call directly, her voice dripping with false concern. Grant, honey, I heard about you and Nina. I'm so sorry. Is there anything I can do? That's very kind of you, Sloan, but we're handling things privately. Of course. It's just, well, Nina's been staying at my place, and she's absolutely devastated. She says this is all a big misunderstanding. Interesting. So Nina was spinning the story as a misunderstanding, rather than admitting to the affair. That wouldn't last long once Oliver's legal troubles became public. I'm sure she's upset, I said neutrally. She is. She keeps saying you've frozen her out of everything. Her credit cards, the bank accounts, even the boutique's business account. That seems a little harsh, don't you think? Sloan, I appreciate your concern, but this is between Nina and me. I know. It's just, she's my best friend, you know? I hate seeing her like this. After I hung up, Jesse appeared in my doorway with coffee and a knowing look. Let me guess. The cavalry is calling to defend Nina's honor? Something like that. Sloan seems to think I'm being unreasonable. Wait until she finds out about Oliver. That should change her tune. Patricia called around noon with an update that made my day considerably brighter. Oliver's attorney contacted me this morning, she reported. Apparently, he's received our demand letter regarding reimbursement for gifts purchased with marital funds. How much are we talking about? Approximately $43,000. Watches, jewelry, clothing, hotel stays, restaurant bills. Your wife was very generous with your money. $43,000. I felt sick thinking about how many times I'd worried about our budget while Nina was spending our money on her boyfriend. What's Oliver's response? Denial, of course. His attorney claims he had no knowledge that the gifts came from marital funds. But here's the interesting part. He's already distancing himself from Nina. His attorney made it very clear that their friendship is over. Honor among thieves. Exactly. When the money stops flowing, so does the love. We should have a response to our demand letter by Friday. That afternoon, I decided to take a drive past Nina's boutique. It was located in a trendy shopping district, sandwiched between a high-end jewelry store and an art gallery. The closed sign was hanging in the window, which was unusual for a Wednesday afternoon. I parked across the street and called the boutique's number. It went straight to voicemail. You've reached Nina's boutique. We're temporarily closed for inventory. Please leave a message and we'll get back to you soon. Temporarily closed for inventory. More like temporarily closed for lack of funds to pay the staff. My phone rang as I was driving home. Nina's number flashed on the screen, and after a moment's hesitation, I answered. What can I do for you, Nina? I need to get some of my things from the house. Her voice was strained, exhausted. Fine. I'll be there at 6. You can come by then. Can't I just use my key? No, the locks have been changed. Silence. Then, you changed the locks on our house? My house. The deed is in my name only, remember? Another one of those business decisions you wouldn't understand. She hung up without responding. At 6 o'clock sharp, a silver Mercedes pulled into my driveway. Nina got out of the passenger side, followed by Sloan from the driver's seat. Apparently, Nina needed moral support for this encounter. I opened the front door as they approached, noting that Nina looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wasn't wearing makeup. The stress was showing. I just need some clothes and personal items, she said without meeting my eyes. Of course. Take whatever belongs to you. They spent an hour packing suitcases while I worked in my home office, listening to their muffled conversation through the walls. I caught fragments, Sloan reassuring Nina that things would work out, Nina crying about how unfair everything was, both of them discussing Oliver's sudden disappearance from Nina's life. When they finished, Nina appeared in my office doorway one last time. Grant, please. We can fix this. 20 years of marriage has to count for something. It does count, I said. It counts as 20 years of me being faithful while you planned your exit strategy. That's not what this was. Then what was it? She had no answer. Again. After they left, I walked through the house, noting what she'd taken. Clothes, jewelry, some books, a few pieces of art we'd bought together. She'd left behind everything that really mattered, the photos from our honeymoon, the gifts I'd given her over the years, the mementos from our early days together. It was like she was erasing our history along with our marriage. Thursday brought news that Oliver's construction supply business was having its own problems. Word had spread through the industry about his involvement in my divorce, and several contractors had canceled orders. Nobody wanted to be associated with someone who'd betrayed a business partner. Jesse had heard the gossip at a construction industry lunch. "Oliver's scrambling," he reported. "Apparently he's lost 3 major contracts this week. People are saying he can't be trusted. What goes around comes around." "There's more. I heard he's trying to sell his condo. Probably needs the cash to pay you back." The thought of Oliver having to sell his precious condo, the one he'd probably entertained my wife in, filled me with satisfaction. Friday afternoon brought the response Patricia had been waiting for. Oliver's attorney had agreed to a settlement, $30,000 in cash, paid immediately in exchange for us dropping all claims against him. "It's less than the full amount," Patricia explained, "but it's cash in hand, and it gets him out of our lives permanently." "Take it. There's one condition. Oliver wants a non-disclosure agreement. He doesn't want any of this becoming public." "Absolutely not. I'm not helping him save face." "I thought you'd say that. I already declined. He can pay the full amount or take his chances in court." By Friday evening, Oliver had agreed to pay the full $43,000 with no non-disclosure agreement. Apparently, the threat of public humiliation was more powerful than I'd expected. That weekend, I ran into several people who knew Nina and me socially. The conversations were awkward, filled with carefully neutral comments about how sorry they were to hear about our difficulties. It was clear that people were choosing sides, and most of them were choosing mine. The turning point came at a charity event Saturday night. I'd considered not going, but decided that hiding would only fuel more gossip. I needed to show that I was moving on with my life. The event was held at the Breakers, Palm Beach's most prestigious hotel. I arrived alone, which immediately drew attention from the other guests. Within minutes, I was surrounded by concerned friends offering support and asking carefully worded questions about Nina. "We heard she's been having a difficult time," said Margaret Whitman, the wife of a prominent surgeon. "Is she all right?" "Nina's fine," I replied. "She's staying with friends while we work things out." "Such a shame," Margaret continued. "You two always seemed so happy together." Before I could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. Nina had arrived, wearing a stunning red dress and accompanied by a man I didn't recognize. She looked radiant, clearly trying to project an image of success and happiness despite her circumstances. The room fell silent as people noticed her. Then the whispers began. Nina worked the room with her usual charm, but I could see the strain in her smile, the way her laugh was just a little too loud, a little too forced. She was putting on a performance, and everyone knew it. Our eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then she lifted her chin defiantly and turned away, continuing her conversation with a group of women who looked distinctly uncomfortable. I was talking with a potential client when Sloane appeared at my elbow, her face flushed with anger. "You should be ashamed of yourself," she hissed. "Look what you've done to her." "I'm sorry?" "Nina's been destroyed by this. Her business is gone, her reputation is ruined, and you're acting like nothing happened." "Sloane, I think you have this backward. I'm not the one who had an affair." "That's not the point. You didn't have to be so cruel about it. Freezing her accounts, taking away her credit cards, forcing her out of her own home, it's vindictive. It's divorce. It's revenge. She wasn't wrong about that." The evening continued with forced normalcy, but I could feel the undercurrent of tension throughout the room. People were watching Nina and me, waiting to see if we'd interact, looking for drama to fuel their gossip. Nina managed to avoid me for most of the night, but as the event was winding down, she appeared beside me at the bar. "Enjoying yourself?" she asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. "It's a nice event. Good cause." "I'm sure it is. Tell me, Grant, are you proud of what you've accomplished?" "What do you mean?" "You've destroyed my business, ruined my reputation, and turned our friends against me, all because of one mistake." "One mistake that lasted how long?" She ignored the question. "I hope it was worth it. I hope your revenge makes you happy." "It's not about revenge, Nina. It's about consequences." "Same thing." She walked away without another word, leaving me at the bar with a distinct feeling that this wasn't over. Nina wasn't the type to go quietly, and I had a feeling she was planning something. I was right. Sunday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was having coffee on my back patio when the doorbell rang, followed immediately by aggressive pounding on the front door. Through the peephole, I saw Oliver Keene looking disheveled and desperate, his usually perfect hair unkempt, his expensive suit wrinkled. He'd clearly had a rough few days. I opened the door but left the security chain attached, creating a gap of only a few inches. We need to talk, Oliver said, his voice strained. I think our attorneys have said everything that needs to be said. This is between you and me, man to man. There's nothing between us anymore, Oliver. You made sure of that. Look, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but this has gone far enough. You've gotten your money back, Nina and I are finished, and my business is in shambles. What more do you want? I want you off my property. Grant, please, just give me 5 minutes, let me explain. Against my better judgment, I closed the door, removed the chain, and reopened it. Oliver looked even worse up close. Dark circles under his eyes, the smell of alcohol on his breath, his hands shaking slightly. You have 5 minutes, I said, not inviting him inside. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he began. Nina and I, it just developed over time. We didn't plan it. But you didn't stop it either. No, we didn't. And I'm sorry about that. But you have to understand, your marriage was already in trouble. Nina was lonely, neglected. She needed someone to pay attention to her. So you volunteered. It wasn't like that. We connected, you know? We understood each other. I stared at him, amazed by his ability to rationalize betraying a business partner and friend. Oliver, do you know what I do for a living? You're an architect. I design buildings. And the first thing you learn in architecture is that if the foundation is compromised, the entire structure will eventually collapse. You and Nina didn't just damage my marriage, you destroyed the foundation it was built on. But marriages can be rebuilt. People work through affairs all the time. Not this marriage. Not after what she said to me in Miami. What did she say? I told him about the beach incident, about Nina pushing me away and calling me embarrassing. Oliver's face fell as he realized the magnitude of what had happened. She was probably just stressed about us, about keeping it secret. She was ashamed of me, Oliver, her husband of 20 years. She was more comfortable being seen with you than with me. Grant, I'm begging you, call off your lawyers. Let this end here. We've all suffered enough. Have we? Because from where I'm standing, you and Nina made choices that destroyed multiple lives, and now you're asking me to make it easier for you to escape the consequences? What do you want from us? I want you to live with what you've done. I want you to remember that actions have consequences. And I want you to stay the hell away from me. Oliver stood there for a moment, clearly realizing that his appeal had failed. When he spoke again, his voice had a harder edge. You know, Nina was right about you. You are embarrassing. You're a small, petty man who can't handle losing his wife to someone better. And yet she's the one living on a friend's couch while I'm in my own home. Funny how that worked out. He left without another word, squealing his tires as he drove away. I watched him go, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The boy I'd known in college, the man I'd trusted with my business and my friendship, was gone. In his place was someone I didn't recognize. Monday brought news that the gossip mill had been working overtime. Jesse arrived at my office with reports from around town. Nina's been making the rounds, he said, settling into his usual chair. She's telling everyone who'll listen that you're being vindictive and cruel. What's the response? Mixed. Some people are sympathetic, especially the women who don't know about Oliver, but others are asking questions. Word is getting out about the affair. How? Sloan, believe it or not. Apparently she and Nina had a falling out over the weekend. Sloan found out about some financial irregularities with the boutique, money that Nina borrowed from the business account for personal use. This was news to me. What kind of irregularities? I don't have details, but it sounds like Nina was using the boutique as her personal piggy bank. Sloan's talking to an attorney about recovering the money. The irony was perfect. Nina's best friend and business partner was now her enemy, and for the same reason I was, financial betrayal. Tuesday brought a call from Patricia with an update on the divorce proceedings. Nina's hired an attorney, she reported. David Morrison. He's competent but not particularly aggressive. I think they're going to try for a quick settlement. What kind of settlement? Probably 50-50 on everything. Standard no-fault divorce. Except this isn't a no-fault divorce? Exactly. Morrison called this morning to feel out our position. I made it clear that we have extensive documentation of adultery and financial misconduct. He seemed surprised. Surprised? I don't think Nina told him about Oliver or the money she spent on him. Morrison was operating under the assumption that this was a standard marital breakdown. What happens when he finds out the truth? He'll either demand a much larger retainer or drop her as a client. Defending a cheating spouse who misused marital funds is a difficult case to win. Wednesday brought the confrontation I'd been expecting. Nina called and asked to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop in downtown West Palm Beach. I agreed, curious to hear what she had to say. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with papers spread in front of her. She looked better than she had at the charity event. Her hair was styled, her makeup was perfect, and she was wearing one of her favorite business suits. She was preparing for battle. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "What did you want to discuss?" "I want to make you an offer." She slid a document across the table. It was a proposed settlement agreement, offering me 60% of our assets in exchange for a quick, quiet divorce. 60%? I said after scanning the document. "That's generous of you." "I want this to end, Grant. The fighting, the lawyers, the gossip, it's destroying both of us." "Is it? Because from my perspective, I'm doing fine." "Are you? Because I've heard differently. I've heard that your business is suffering because clients don't want to work with someone going through a messy divorce." She wasn't entirely wrong. I had lost one potential client who'd cited personal complications as a reason for going with another firm, but overall, my business was stable. "My business is fine, Nina, but thank you for your concern. Look, I know you're angry. You have every right to be, but we can end this now, divide our assets fairly, and move on with our lives." "What about Oliver? What about him? Are you planning to move on with your life with him?" Her face flushed slightly. "Oliver and I are over. That ended when all this started. Because he dumped you when the money stopped flowing. Because we realized it was a mistake. A mistake that lasted how long, Nina? I've asked you this question 3 times and you've never answered." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. 8 months, she said quietly. 8 months, 2/3 of a year. Not a momentary lapse in judgment or a single mistake, but a sustained, deliberate betrayal of our marriage. 8 months, I repeated. And in all that time, you never considered ending our marriage before starting a relationship with someone else? It wasn't supposed to go that far. It started as friendship, then emotional support, then you were sleeping with him while lying to me every day. Yes. At least she was finally being honest. "Nina, do you remember our wedding vows?" "Of course." "For better or worse, in sickness and in health, forsaking all others." "Do you remember that part? Forsaking all others?" "Grant, please." "You stood in front of our families and friends and promised to forsake all others. Then you spent 8 months doing exactly the opposite. People make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice you made every day for 8 months. She wiped her eyes with a tissue, smearing her mascara slightly. "So, what happens now? We destroy each other in court? We air all our dirty laundry in public? How does that help anyone?" "It establishes consequences for actions. It shows that promises matter, that vows have meaning. It shows that you're vindictive and cruel. Maybe, but it also shows that I won't be humiliated and discarded without a fight." She gathered up her papers, clearly realizing that her settlement offer had been rejected. "You're going to regret this, Grant. A public divorce trial will hurt you as much as it hurts me. We'll see." She left without another word, her coffee untouched and her mascara running down her cheeks. That evening, I got a call from Jesse with news that changed everything. "You need to see the news," he said urgently. "Turn on Channel 12. I grabbed the remote and switched to the local news station. The anchor was reading a story about a local business scandal involving a boutique owner and her construction supplier boyfriend who had allegedly defrauded customers and investors. The story was about Nina and Oliver. According to the report, several customers had filed complaints with the Better Business Bureau claiming that Nina's boutique had taken payment for custom orders that were never delivered. The boutique had apparently been operating while insolvent, taking new orders to pay old debts. Oliver's construction business was facing similar allegations from contractors who claimed he'd taken payment for materials that were never delivered. The reporter mentioned that both businesses were connected to an ongoing divorce case involving significant financial irregularities. My phone started ringing immediately. Patricia, Jesse, several friends who'd seen the news, but the call that mattered most came from David Morrison, Nina's attorney. "Mr. Elwood, this is David Morrison. I represent your wife in the divorce proceedings. I know who you are. I'm calling to inform you that I'm withdrawing from the case, effective immediately. May I ask why? Professional ethics. I can't represent a client who hasn't been forthcoming about material facts in their case." After he hung up, I poured myself a drink and sat on my back patio, watching the sun set over the water. For the first time in months, I felt truly peaceful. Nina had finally gotten what she'd asked for in Miami. She was no longer embarrassed by me in public. Now she was embarrassed by herself. The news story had unleashed an avalanche of consequences that even I hadn't anticipated. By Thursday morning, Nina's boutique was swarming with investigators from the state attorney's office. the Better Business Bureau, and several law enforcement agencies. What had started as a divorce case was rapidly becoming a criminal investigation. Patricia called with updates throughout the day. "The state's attorney office wants to interview you," she reported. "They're investigating possible fraud charges against both Nina and Oliver." "What kind of fraud?" "Wire fraud, mail fraud, possibly racketeering if they can prove the businesses were operating as a criminal enterprise. Taking money for goods and services they knew they couldn't deliver crosses the line from civil to criminal." I felt a chill run down my spine. I'd wanted revenge, but I'd never intended for Nina to face criminal charges. "What's my exposure in all this?" "Minimal. You're clearly a victim, not a participant. But they'll want to know about any financial irregularities you observed, any conversations you had with Nina about the business, that sort of thing." "And Nina?" "She's in serious trouble. Without an attorney, facing potential criminal charges, and completely out of money, it's a perfect storm." That afternoon, I drove past Nina's boutique one last time. The windows were covered with official notices, and crime scene tape blocked the entrance. A small crowd of onlookers had gathered, taking photos and speculating about what had happened. I recognized several of Nina's former customers in the crowd, women who'd been friends with her just weeks earlier. Now they were discussing her like she was a stranger, their voices filled with outrage and betrayal. "I gave her $3,000 for a custom dress," one woman was saying. "She promised it would be ready for my daughter's wedding. Now I find out she spent the money on her boyfriend." "I heard she owes over $200,000 to customers," another added. "How do you steal that much money and think you won't get caught?" I didn't stay to hear more. Seeing Nina's life completely destroyed gave me no pleasure, only a hollow sense that justice had been served in the harshest possible way. Friday brought news that Oliver had been arrested trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. Apparently, he'd liquidated his remaining assets and was attempting to flee the country when federal marshals caught up with him at Miami International Airport. The local news covered his arrest with the same breathless excitement they'd shown for the initial story. Video of Oliver in handcuffs, being led through the airport by federal agents, played on every channel. Jesse watched the coverage with me in my office, shaking his head in amazement. "6 months ago, this guy was your business partner," he said. "Now he's facing federal charges. How does someone's life fall apart that quickly?" "Poor choices compound," I replied. "One bad decision leads to another until you're trapped in a situation you can't escape." "Do you feel bad for him?" I considered the question. Oliver had been my friend once, someone I'd trusted with my business and my personal life, but that person was gone, replaced by someone who'd betrayed everything we'd built together. "I feel bad for who he used to be," I said finally, "but not for who he chose to become." Saturday brought an unexpected visitor. I was working in my home office when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Sloan Martinez standing on my front porch, looking nervous and uncomfortable. I opened the door cautiously. "Sloan?" "Grant, I know you probably don't want to see me, but I need to talk to you." "About what?" "About Nina. About what's happening to her." I considered turning her away, but curiosity got the better of me. I invited her in and offered her coffee, which she accepted gratefully. "I want to apologize," she said once we were seated in my living room, "for what I said at the charity event, for taking Nina's side without knowing all the facts. You were being a loyal friend. I was being naive. I had no idea about Oliver, about the money she was stealing from customers, about any of it. What do you know now?" "Everything. Nina finally told me the whole story when the investigators started asking questions. The affair, the money she spent on Oliver, the way she was running the boutique into the ground to fund their relationship." Sloan paused, clearly struggling with what she wanted to say next. "She asked me to help her," she continued, "to lie to the investigators, to say that I knew about the business problems and approved of how she was handling them." "What did you tell her?" "I told her I couldn't do that. I told her she needed to take responsibility for what she'd done." "How did she respond?" "She called me a traitor, said I was abandoning her when she needed me most." Sloan's eyes filled with tears. "Grant, I've known Nina for 15 years. I thought I knew who she was. But the woman who asked me to lie to federal investigators, that's not the person I thought was my best friend." "People change. Or maybe they just reveal who they really were all along." "Maybe. But I keep thinking about all the signs I missed, all the times she lied to me without me realizing it. How do you trust anyone after something like this?" It was a question I'd been asking myself for weeks. "You don't," I said. "At least not right away. Trust has to be rebuilt, and that takes time." Sloan finished her coffee and prepared to leave. At the door, she turned back to me one last time. "Nina's staying at a motel now. The Sunset Inn on Dixie Highway. She's completely alone, no money, no friends, no family willing to help. I thought you should know. Why? Because despite everything she's done, she's still human. And humans shouldn't have to face something like this completely alone. After Sloane left, I sat in my living room thinking about Nina at the Sunset Inn, a rundown motel that rented rooms by the week to people with nowhere else to go. 6 months ago, she'd been living in a waterfront mansion, driving a luxury car, and shopping at the most expensive boutiques in Palm Beach. Now she was facing federal fraud charges while living in a motel room. The transformation was so complete, so devastating, that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Sunday evening brought the call I'd been expecting. Nina's number appeared on my phone, and after a moment's hesitation, I answered. Grant? Her voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from crying. Hello, Nina. I need help. What kind of help? I need a lawyer. The public defender they assigned to me says I'm looking at 5 to 10 years in federal prison. 5 to 10 years, Grant. I'm sorry to hear that. I know you hate me. I know I deserve that. But please, I'm begging you. Help me find a good attorney. I'll pay you back somehow, I promise. With what? You don't have any money. I'll get money. I'll sell my jewelry, my car, whatever it takes. Nina, your car was repossessed yesterday, and your jewelry was purchased with stolen money, so it's evidence in a criminal case. Silence. Then the sound of quiet sobbing. I'm going to prison, she said finally. I'm going to lose everything and go to prison? You've already lost everything. Grant, please. I know I hurt you. I know I destroyed our marriage and betrayed your trust. But we were married for 20 years. That has to count for something. 20 years. She was right about that. 20 years of shared history, of good times and bad, of building a life together. 20 years that she'd thrown away for 8 months with Oliver. It does count, I said. It counts as 20 years of me loving someone who didn't exist. I did exist. The woman you married, the woman you fell in love with, she was real. Was she? Because the woman I married wouldn't have had an affair. She wouldn't have stolen money from customers. She wouldn't have asked me to lie to federal investigators. People make mistakes, Grant. People change. Yes, they do. And you changed into someone I don't recognize. So that's it? You're just going to let me go to prison? I'm not letting you do anything, Nina. You made choices, and now you're facing the consequences of those choices. You could help me if you wanted to. You have money, connections, influence. You could make this go away. Even if I could, why would I? Because you loved me once. I did love you once, but the woman I loved wouldn't have asked me to help her escape justice for crimes she committed. She hung up without saying goodbye. Monday morning brought news that Nina had been formally indicted on 17 counts of wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy. Oliver faced similar charges, plus additional counts for attempting to flee the country. The local newspaper ran a front-page story with photos of both of them, Nina's from our last charity event, where she'd looked radiant and successful, and Oliver's from his arrest at the airport, where he'd looked desperate and defeated. The contrast was stark and somehow fitting. Patricia called with the final details of our divorce settlement. With Nina facing criminal charges and having no assets to claim, the proceedings had become a formality. The judge signed the final decree this morning, she reported. You keep the house, the business, the retirement accounts, everything. Nina gets nothing except her personal belongings and whatever debts she accumulated on her own. What about the money Oliver paid back? That's yours. The court ruled it was restitution for marital funds that were misappropriated. So it was over. 20 years of marriage dissolved in a stack of legal documents, with Nina getting exactly what she'd brought to the relationship. Nothing. That evening, I sat on my back patio with a glass of wine, watching the sunset over the water. For the first time in months, I felt truly at peace. The anger that had consumed me since discovering Nina's affair was finally gone, replaced by something that might have been closure. My phone buzzed with a text message from Jesse. Saw the news about the final divorce decree. How are you feeling? I typed back, free. And I was. Free from the lies, the betrayal, the constant wondering what was real and what was performance. Free from loving someone who saw me as an embarrassment, who pushed me away in public while spending my money on another man in private. Free to build a new life on a foundation that wouldn't crumble at the first sign of stress. Tuesday brought one final surprise. I was leaving my office when I saw a familiar figure standing by my car. Nina looked terrible, thin, pale, wearing clothes that hung loosely on her diminished frame. The stress of the past few weeks had aged her years. I know you don't want to see me, she said as I approached, but I needed to say goodbye. Goodbye? I'm pleading guilty tomorrow. My attorney worked out a deal with the prosecutors. 7 years in federal prison, full restitution to the victims. 7 years. She'd be 57 when she got out. her life essentially over. "I'm sorry it came to this," I said, and meant it. "Are you? Because I keep thinking that this is what you wanted all along, your revenge. I wanted you to face consequences for your actions. I never wanted your life to be destroyed. Same thing?" Maybe she was right. Maybe there was no difference between consequences and revenge when the consequences were this severe. "Nina, why did you do it? The affair, the stealing, all of it. We had a good life together." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ground. "I was bored," she said finally. "Bored with our life, bored with our marriage, bored with being the wife of a successful but predictable man. Oliver made me feel exciting, dangerous, alive." "So you threw away 20 years of marriage because you were bored?" "I threw away 20 years of marriage because I was selfish and stupid and thought I could have both lives, the security of being married to you and the excitement of being with him." At least she was finally being completely honest. "I'm sorry," she continued, "for all of it, for the affair, for the lies, for what I said to you in Miami. You didn't deserve any of it." "No, I didn't. I know it doesn't matter now, but I want you to know that I did love you. Maybe not the way you deserved to be loved, but I did love you. I believe you, and I loved you too. But love wasn't enough to overcome what you chose to do." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Will you ever forgive me?" I thought about the question. Forgiveness was supposed to be healing, liberating, the final step in moving past betrayal. But looking at Nina, broken, defeated, facing 7 years in prison, I realized that forgiveness was irrelevant. "I don't need to forgive you, Nina. I just need to forget you." She flinched as if I'd slapped her, but she nodded. "Goodbye, Grant." "Goodbye, Nina." I watched her walk away, disappearing into the crowd of people heading home from work. Normal people with normal problems, living normal lives that didn't involve federal fraud charges or destroyed marriages. I got in my car and drove home to my empty house, which no longer felt empty. It felt peaceful, quiet, mine. That night, I deleted Nina's contact information from my phone, removed our wedding photos from the walls, and packed away the last reminders of our life together. 20 years reduced to a few boxes in the garage, waiting for donation to charity. The next morning brought news that Nina had indeed pleaded guilty to all charges. The local paper ran a small story about it, noting that she'd been sentenced to 7 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution to her victims. Oliver, meanwhile, had decided to fight the charges. His trial was scheduled for the following year, and legal experts predicted he'd receive a much harsher sentence than Nina for attempting to flee the country. I felt no satisfaction reading about their downfall, only a sense that justice had been served and the chapter was finally closed. 6 months later, I was having dinner with a client when she mentioned seeing Nina on the local news. "Wasn't that your ex-wife?" she asked. "The one who went to prison for fraud?" "Yes," I replied. "But that was a long time ago." And it was. Not in calendar time, but in emotional distance. Nina Harrow Elwood was part of my past, a cautionary tale about the difference between love and trust, between marriage and partnership. I'd built a new life on a stronger foundation, one that couldn't be shaken by boredom or betrayal or the temptation of something that seemed more exciting than what was real. The woman who'd once pushed me away in public, who'd called me embarrassing, who'd spent 8 months lying to my face while spending my money on another man, that woman was exactly where she belonged, and I was exactly where I belonged too.